Part 1. Building Supporting Skills. Exercise P3. Analyzing Speech Patterns.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Exercise P4. Indicating Speech Patterns.
Carnivals, with spectacular parades, masked balls, mock ceremonials, and street dancing, usually last for a week or more before Mardi Gras itself.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Exercise P5. Imitating Speech Patterns.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Exercise P6. Listening to Accents.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Since the 7th century, large bells have been used in cathedrals, churches, and monasteries. The greatest bell in the world is in Moscow. This famous king of bells weighs about 198 tons. The next two largest bells are also located in Russia. One near St. Petersburg weighs 171 tons, and another in Moscow weighs 110 tons. Great Paul, the bell at St. Paul's in London, is the largest bell in England, but weighs a mere 17 tons.
Part 2. Building Skills. Listening. Exercise L1. Writing what the speaker means. 1.
Alternative medicine's efficacy has never been confirmed, so obviously we need to put them under the same strict investigation as we do with developing medicines, medicines under development.
2.
So the brain has this tendency, and this shouldn't surprise you about the brain. You know about infants' recognition of faces, and we're all familiar, of course, with the face we call the man in the moon. This tendency is to interpret vague images as specific ones.
3.
The savagery of the Mongols probably, no doubt, exaggerated, was moderated. Moderated because they lived on tribute, and in order to collect tribute, only prosperous subjects can provide tribute.
4.
The technique of repeating the initial consonant sound, that's alliteration. I don't have to spell that for you, do I? That's a common poetic device.
5. Exercise L2. Answering questions about content. 1.
Long-term food storage occurs in the endosperm of the seed.
Where does food storage occur? 2.
We should be concerned about, as future teachers, does the average person understand the difference between science and pseudoscience? We seem to be failing in teaching fundamental critical thinking skills.
Why does the professor believe teachers have not succeeded in teaching critical thinking skills? 3.
If you take a universal unit of time, let's say a second. If you take a second, 1/60th of a minute, which is 1/60th of an hour, 1/24th of a day, you do the math. If you take that universal unit of time, you have to remember that the Earth doesn't rotate quite regularly. Not an accurate enough standard for modern measurements.
What is the professor pointing out? 4.
I think you already know my view on borrowing money. It's good if what you're getting, say a house in an up-and-coming area, will ultimately be worth more than the money and interest you pay back. And bad when you buy a car, for instance, that you can't sell at a profit. Then you don't want. You shouldn't borrow. You should never borrow to buy something that depreciates, goes down in value.
Under what conditions does the speaker think it is acceptable to borrow money? Exercise L3. Identifying the meaning of filler phrases and reductions. 1.
So if these tribes weren't, literate, how did they send messages?
Well, let's say that if you wanted to communicate something important and weren't literate, you'd draw a stylized picture, a simplified one, something that was agreed upon.
What does the woman mean by, "let's say that"? 2.
Excuse me, I've made an appointment. They recommended that students get a flu shot. Here's my student ID.
Okay. Let me see. Here are your records, Jeff. Go ahead and take a seat. A nurse will be with you in just a second.
What does the woman mean by "let me see"? 3.
I just don't remember how to do this calculus problem.
Oh, come on now. You attended Dr. Brown's lecture. You did, didn't you?
What does the woman mean by "come on now"? 4.
Well, how does the mother's smoking, actually hurt the baby? How does the smoke get to the fetus and reduce the oxygen to the unborn baby?
Well, see, carbon monoxide, instead of oxygen, is absorbed from hemoglobin molecules in the mother's blood.
What does the man mean by "see"? 'Exercise L5. Identifying reference in conversation. 1.
You know the author Harriet Beecher Stowe?
The one who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin about slavery, right?
Yeah, well, when he met her, President Lincoln supposedly called her the little lady who started the Civil War.
2.
What'd you find out about the Alaskan Purchase?
Well, when the U.S. Secretary of State, who was William Seward then, when he arranged to purchase it from Russia in 1867, people thought the idea was crazy, and they started calling Alaska, the Alaskan Purchase, Seward's Folly.
Oh, I remember reading that.
3.
What'd you finally decide to do your political science paper on?
I'm doing a comparative study between the American Congress and the British Parliament.
Find anything interesting?
Well, for one thing, there are no restrictions on debates in the English House of Lords. So if its members think something is really important, they talk the issue through until they're all satisfied.
4.
Now, I'd like all of you to try to get to the Turkish Cultural Arts exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Do you know how long it'll be on for?
Yes, till November 18th. The museum opening times are 10 to 5 from Tuesday through Saturday and at 12 to 5 on Sundays. The museum is closed on Mondays. Okay? There'll be a number of events to complement the exhibition. These will include 3 lectures. Of course, I realize you have busy schedules, but try to attend at least one.
Do you have the topics and dates of the lectures?
No, I don't. Not with me, anyway. I'll let you know next week. Also, there will be an evening of traditional Turkish music.
Oh, I'd be very interested in that. Could you try to get more information on the music as well?
Exercise L6. Identifying reference in a lecture. 1.
Because of the disintegration, breakdown of the traditional family in many countries, we have seen this happening here. Many elderly people have no, what you could describe as a place to call home. And there's no family members to help these people if they have, in case of an emergency. So in order to address these problems of the delegates, the elderly, in order to address the problems of the elderly, delegates to the UN formed the United Nations Symposium on Population to meet and to pool their ideas, discuss the different possibilities, and make recommendations.
2.
To climb Mount Everest is possibly or probably the dream of every mountaineer. But you can't just go out and climb Mount Everest. It takes a lot of planning, expenses to think about, and so on and so forth. One of the things that a club, you have to form a kind of group, an alpine club. You can't go climb Mount Everest by yourself. Anyway, in order for an alpine club to make this climb, it must apply to the Nepalese Tourism Ministry for a permit. You need a permit. Normally, these are granted to only a few groups each season.
Three.
Blaise Pascal, the guy that's known for Pascal's law, he also invented the first digital calculator. He did this to help his father. His father was a tax collector. Anyway, a particular problem that he faced was the division of the French currency at the time. Unlike the euro, or even the French franc, the currency during Pascal's time was more complicated. So anyway, at that time, Pascal was working on this in the 1640s. The currency was in livre, sol, and denier. Now, 12 deniers made a sol, and 20 made a livre. It was much more difficult, technology-wise, to build a machine to calculate such divisions of currency than it would have been, say, if the currency was like today's currencies, which are divisible by 10.
Exercise L7. Following signals. 1.
Land reform can involve large estates being parceled out in smaller plots. In contrast, it can also involve small landholdings being consolidated into larger estates.
2.
Using word connotations that have powerful associations for your reader or listener has the effect of making your facts or opinions appear more attractive or less attractive. Consequently, writers and speakers use connotations to persuade their audience.
3.
Sea defenses are built to prevent beaches from being washed away. However, these defenses may be the cause of land erosion further along the coastline.
4.
After the beginning draft of a paper is finished, first put away the paper and do something else, and then go back to it later with a clear mind.
5.
The decomposition in organic matter is important for the release and circulation of minerals into the environment. In particular, detritus feeders like shrimp in the sea and earthworms on land have a role in the breakdown of dead material.
Exercise L8. Using signals for understanding conversations and lectures. 1.
The importance of these dinosaur tracks that were discovered is how much information about dinosaurs that we can get from them. First, these tracks are in an area near where, at the time of these animals, there were seas. So, they were walking along a beach and sinking into the sand. Okay? Second, besides the tracks themselves, giving a location and, well, there also appear to be tracks of young dinosaurs near tracks of older ones. So we can imagine a moving herd, like a herd of elephants. Third, the tracks are in sequences of about 8 to 10 paces. Now, this enables scientists to calculate both the animal's stride and speed. And finally, the depth of the print of the larger animals contrasted with the smaller ones. Well, we can use this information to show that the dinosaurs may have weighed as much as 10,000 pounds and been 23 feet tall.
2.
Okay, so this study showed that trees could defend themselves against insects. Pests came and stripped the leaves, okay? Now, as a result of the attack, the trees appeared to defend themselves by undergoing changes in the nutritional quality of their leaves. These changes were directly caused by the pest attack. But an interesting thing about the attack was, what was found was that the leaves of nearby trees underwent the same changes in nutritional quality as the ones that were attacked. Now, why would a pest attack on one tree cause other trees to make these nutritional changes in their leaves as well? So, what was happening here? How did the neighboring trees know when they should make these changes? Well, it's hypothesized that the trees that were being studied, the ones attacked, were emitting chemical substances. So the second result of the attack was that the trees under attack seemed to chemically transmit that information to other trees, sort of chemically told the others about the attack. Consequently, the trees that were not under direct attack began to set up their defenses. It's for that reason that trees can chemically communicate pest attack, that these same chemical substances are being looked at as a possible way to control pests.
Three.
Are you ready for the marine biology test?
Well, yeah. Quiz me.
Okay. What are the 3 types of tail fins? Caudal fins.
Right. Caudal fins or tail fins are, rounded, forked, and lunate.
Right. And what's the difference?
Well, rounded fins are soft and flexible.
What are they good for?
Let's see. They're good for maneuvering and effective for speed. No, for acceleration.
Okay. And forked fins?
Oh, rounded fins aren't very efficient for continuous swimming because of the drag and the fish gets tired. But a fish with forked fins can swim quickly without getting tired out. Forked fins have less drag.
That's right. And what about lunate fins?
Oh, those are good for going continuously for long distances.
And how is that possible?
Well, they're rigid.
So?
That makes for the book said, high propulsive efficiency, and there's very little drag because of a small surface area.
So why don't all fish have lunate fins if they're so effective?
Oh, because, the rigidity. It makes it hard for the fish to maneuver.
Well, it sounds like you know your caudal fins. Let's hope there's a question about them on the test.
4.
How's the physics class going?
Let's not even talk about it. I'm so confused.
Oh? What don't you understand?
Well, all this. Stable or statically stable equilibrium or whatever.
Okay, you're talking about static stability versus, dynamic stability, I bet.
I don't know. Yeah, I think those are the terms.
I think you're getting confused by the terms rather than the ideas.
Oh.
Let me give you a simple illustration, okay?
If you think it'll help.
Visualize a kid on a tricycle and one on a bicycle. Got it?
Okay.
Well, if a child stops and sits on his tricycle with his feet on the pedals, it would stand there. It couldn't be pushed over very easily, right?
Right.
But if a kid stops on a bicycle, he can't just sit there on the bike at a dead stop with his feet on the pedals. He'd topple over, right?
Right.
So physicists say that the tricycle has static stability. That means it balances at a standstill, whereas the bicycle doesn't balance at a standstill. Are you with me?
Okay. Trike stable when standing still, bicycle not.
Right. Now think of the kid riding the bicycle. You've seen people speeding along, and then they lean into the corner to go around it. Did you ever go really fast on your trike as a kid and then make a fast turn? What happened?
I can't remember my tricycle days. But I can imagine that the kid on the tricycle will crash.
Yeah, that's right. The kid on the tricycle will crash, and the one on the bike won't. And this is called dynamic stability. The bicycle has dynamic stability, and the tricycle doesn't.
So, the bicycle is stable when moving, dynamic stability, and the tricycle is stable when not moving, static stability. Okay, yeah, I can understand that.
Exercise L9. Predicting the topic. 1.
The United Kingdom is made up of 4 countries: England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and, Wales.
2.
Architects from around the world vote for one architect, the one architect they believe should receive the award for architecture.
3.
Let me show you samples of Irish linen to help you get, a better idea of the various patterns.
Four.
There are a number of human and animal-shaped figures carved in hillsides around the world.
5.
I attended Professor Brown's talk on the geology of Mars last night.
6. Exercise L10. Identifying the topic from the first statement. 1.
The practice of acupuncture began in China about 5,000 years ago.
2.
Muscles are made of lots of, many fine fibers about 25 millimeters long.
3.
A whole new world of opportunities and challenges in education has been opened up by radio. I mean satellite. Satellite communications technology has opened up lots of possibilities and challenges in education.
4.
We will be concentrating specifically on the golden age of Spanish literature in this seminar and the historical setting in which the literature flourished.
5.
Although some of the signs and symptoms of the common cold are similar to those of influenza, influenza is a highly contagious and potentially life-threatening disease.
6.
Lack of animal protein in the human diet is a serious cause of malnutrition in many parts of the world.
7. Exercise L11. Determining if the topic is stated in the first sentence. 1.
We have given the name magic square to a square-shaped arrangement of numbers, in which the numbers are arranged so that the groups of numbers all add up to the same figure. In other words, If you were to add the horizontal numbers, you would come up with the same answer as you do when you add the numbers vertically or diagonally. Now, the largest magic square ever devised has the amazing number, anyway, in my opinion, amazing. The number of boxes is 578,865.
Two.
The wealthy have kept their own private collections of animals for thousands of years. The first public zoo, however, was not opened until 1793. That was the zoo at the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. Zoos have not only protected endangered species, but they also allow people to see exotic animals without having to travel to distant countries.
Three.
In the mid-1800s, the overland mail stagecoach carried the mail across the American continent. But because this service was unsatisfactory, kind of slow and not reliable, a freighting firm established a new service called the Pony Express. I'm sure most of you have heard of the Pony Express. The way the Pony Express worked was by use of a relay system. So these daring young riders made weekly treks on horseback across the rough and dangerous terrain between St. Joseph, Missouri and Sacramento, California. Although it was very successful, the Pony Express was short-lived. That was because after only 16 months of being in service, the telegraph came into use. Basically, the telegraph put the Pony Express out of business.
Four.
Penang, Malaysia is the home of the world's largest butterfly farm. This farm is both a sanctuary and breeding center for something like about 2,000 recorded species of Malaysian butterflies. Butterflies which are being driven away from populated areas by pollution and industrialization. So the studies being conducted on the farm are studies into tropical butterflies' habitats, diseases that attack caterpillars, and pest control. Also, research is being done on how the ecological balance would be affected if foreign butterflies were to be imported and bred on the farm.
Five.
Did you enjoy the architecture excursion to St. Martin's Cathedral?
Yes, very much, Professor. And we really appreciate your arranging everything for us.
Thank you. Was there anything special that impressed you?
I especially like the gargoyles. But I was wondering, why did stoneworkers put those grotesque heads on cathedrals anyway? To frighten away bad spirits or what?
No, not at all. Nothing like that. They're designed to catch the water that runs off the roof when it rains or when the snow melts.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. The water collects in the gargoyle's mouth, and the gargoyle kind of like spits the water out onto the street.
That's right. That protects the walls from moisture that would otherwise drip down and cause erosion.
Exercise L12. Identifying a change in topic. 1.
Folk dances. The steps and movements of the folk dances have been passed on from one dancer to another over the years. The movements weren't written down. Since this system is not always very accurate, choreographers had to invent ways of writing down the movements. So at first, they drew little pictures under the music. Then later, they came up with a system that uses dots on lines. These dots represent hands, feet, and heads.
Two.
It was during his search for a new route to India that Columbus reached America. You may find it surprising that even though he made his discovery in 1492, it took a little over 100 years for people to finally settle in the New World. Yeah, so why did they decide to come? Well, some settlers were hoping to escape the problems of the Old World by, moving to the New. Then there were reports that excellent crops could be produced, in Virginia especially. Well, that induced more people to undertake such a long journey across the ocean. So, America was not the sought-after India, but it did offer its settlers a new and potentially rich life.
Three.
It used to be widely accepted that photographs provided a perfect way to document historical events. It seemed that a photographic image preserved in extraordinary detail deeds of both the famous people and of the unknown masses. But this is no longer the case, or at least not the case with contemporary photographs, because technological advances in the field of photography in recent years have made it possible to manipulate and alter photographic images, a process you all know as digital imaging. So, digital imaging, as fun as it might be, or as useful in some fields that it might be, has in fact made it increasingly difficult, impractical really, to use contemporary photographs as a reliable source of information. We can't conclude anymore that photographic records, for those interested in the historical records, can be used for any serious inquiry. You have to take contents of a contemporary photograph with a grain of salt, so to speak.
Four.
You hear snatches of Spanish, French, Russian, Chinese, and a dozen other languages which you probably don't recognize on the streets of major cities in America, right? Okay, even though all kinds of languages are heard, the vast majority of people living in the United States communicate in English. So the United States is considered an English-speaking country. But is English the official language in the U.S.?
Well, sure. All the official stuff, the discussions in the Congress, the official documents, that's all in English.
Can you tell me where in the United States Constitution it says that English is the official language?
No. But maybe it isn't in the Constitution. Maybe it's in a different document.
Well, the fact is that no single language is recognized as an official language in the United States Constitution. Now, having said that there's no official language that's stated at the federal level, don't forget that there are also state constitutions.
Ah, okay.
However, like the U.S. Constitution, most state constitutions don't recognize an official language either. Does anyone know of any state constitutions that do recognize an official language?
Well, I'm from Louisiana, and I think that the Louisiana State Constitution recognizes both English and French as official languages.
Okay. The state of Nebraska made English its official language sometime early in the 20th century, and from time to time, this issue pops up and is discussed in various states.
Listening Mini-Test 1. Questions 1 through 3. Listen to part of a discussion between two friends.
Hey, Sammy, How's your job at the library working out? You're at the university library, aren't you?
Yeah, it's great. I've been working in the acquisitions department.
Oh, what do you do there?
Logging in new books, mostly. It's kind of neat because I get to open all the boxes that arrive. Boxes containing all the newly purchased books. It's kind of like a birthday, unwrapping presents.
That sounds like fun.
That part is, but then I have to enter each book into the computer. I don't mind that too much, but the worst thing is attaching the barcode on the cover. That can get kind of tedious, just doing the same thing over and over again.
1. What are the people discussing? Two. What is the woman referring to when she states, "That sounds like fun"? 3. Which duty does the man like the least? 4. Questions 4 through 6. Listen to part of a lecture from a history class.
William Cody. Well, you probably know him as Buffalo Bill. Okay, so William Cody became an American showman and founded the Great Wild West Show. That was in 1883. He traveled around Europe with other famous people that you probably have also heard of, like people such as the sharpshooter Annie Oakley and the Indian chief Sitting Bull. This Wild West show traveled, as I said, around Europe and performed for many heads of state like the Queen of England. Queen Victoria, the show was featured at her Golden Jubilee celebrations, and the Tsar of Russia. That would have been the Tsar, Alexander III. His father, Alexander II, had been assassinated in 1881, so Alexander III would have seen Cody's show.
4. What is the talk mainly about? Five. What is the woman referring to when she states, "That was in 1883"? 6. In addition to Annie Oakley, which other famous person traveled with Buffalo Bill? Questions 7 through 9. Listen to part of a lecture from a music class.
Just before the turn of the 20th century, a new musical form captivated America, and that was ragtime. I suspect you've all heard of ragtime. The main feature of ragtime is its syncopation. Syncopation. You know how a waltz has a beat of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and a polka has 1, 2, 3, 4. These beats are regular, but in ragtime there's syncopation, a displaced beat or accent. Traditional strong beats become weak, and vice versa. Weak becomes strong. Or the beat isn't evenly spaced, but comes a little earlier than expected, or later. Although ragtime had its start in 1897 with William Krell's Mississippi Rag, and I'm going to be playing that for you in a moment, it was Scott Joplin who popularized the rag with his Maple Leaf Rag. We'll hear that one as well. Now, it was John Philip Sousa, best known for marches actually, who began to feature rags in his band concerts in America and Europe. And by the early 1900s, ragtime was the most popular musical art form in America. Okay, now let's listen to I'd like to play a few of these pieces I've been telling you about.
7. What does the speaker mainly discuss? 8. According to the professor, what is ragtime? 9. What does the professor contrast in his lecture? 10. Questions 10 through 12. Listen to a conversation between two students.
Did you hear on the news last night that the City Museum had just recovered the missing painting by Rembrandt? They said, let me get this right. The curator said the painting had been returned after being out on unauthorized loan for 3 years.
Yeah, I heard that, but I just got in on the tail end of the story. The part I saw when I was watching it, I kept wondering, why that painting? What's so special, about that particular painting? I mean, there are so many more valuable items in the museum. Why was that one stolen?
Yeah, well, they explained that on the news. That same Rembrandt's been stolen 4 times in the last 20 years. Thieves seem to favor it, and the museum curator believes it may have something to do with its size. It's kind of small, 9 inches by 11.
That would make it easy to take. Just put it under your coat and walk out.
Don't get any ideas. Well, they do have surveillance cameras.
I'd say they need something more.
The museum has taken extra security precautions.
How valuable is it, anyway? Did they say?
Yeah, well, the curator said that it's been appraised at $5 million, but he didn't know what a thief could get for it.
That Rembrandt's very well known, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
So why would anyone want a stolen painting that's so easily recognized?
The news reporter asked that same question, and the curator wasn't sure. But he told a story about the Mona Lisa being stolen, and a man painted a bunch of copies and then sold all the fakes as the real stolen one.
10. What are the people discussing? 11. What does the woman mean by the phrase, being out on unauthorized loan for 3 years? 12. What reason is given for the painting's popularity among thieves? 13. Exercise L13. Understanding restatements. 1.
The dialect spoken in Carpathos is so old that many words date back to the time of Homer.
2.
A Frenchman's 25-minute flight in a hot air balloon in 1783 was the first manned flight.
3.
One of the most beautiful birds in the world, the quetzal, takes its name from the Aztec word meaning tail feather.
4.
22 men from Mao Zedong's Red Army had to storm the looting bridge after an all-night march to capture a needed escape route for Mao's forces.
5.
Many relief centers were set up in the drought-stricken areas.
6.
Recently discovered fossils have revolutionized our concept of the human past.
Seven.
Recent explorers have been unable to locate the island that was vividly described in the captain's log in March 1783.
Eight.
The executive secretary of the Protection of the Marine Environment Organization has reported that a large number of dead fish, dolphins, and whales have been spotted off the East Coast.
Exercise L14. Finding two answers. 1.
You didn't come to art class yesterday, did you?
I got out of my chemistry lab late. Anything important I missed?
Yeah. Dr. Matthews has arranged for us to meet at the art museum next week. Next Tuesday. I think that's the 26th. 'Cause the museum's got a special exhibition on fish rubbings.
Fish rubbings? What's that? Not a hands-on exhibition, I hope.
No. Well, not exactly. You missed a good lecture, though. Fish rubbings. It's an ancient art form in which fish are used to make prints.
Sounds slimy. Where was this practiced?
In the Far East and by some native peoples in America.
Will Dr. Matthews expect us to make some of our own fish rubbings afterwards?
I suppose that's up to you. I think it might be interesting to give it a try.
What can be said about fish rubbings? Two.
The world's heaviest gold coin is worth millions of dollars. It was minted in the year 1613 in India. The name of its issuer, Mughal Emperor Jehangir, his name is stamped on the coin. Prior to the reign of this emperor, rulers in India had to obtain permission to mint coins from the caliph, the ruler in Baghdad. Okay? However, Emperor Jehangir changed this tradition. Okay? He, started his own policy of issuing coins in his own name. It was during the time of the Mughal dynasty that many art forms were encouraged to flourish. Emperor Jehangir supported the arts. Therefore, it's not surprising that the art of minting coins began and reached its peak of perfection during his reign.
What is true about Mughal Emperor Jahangir? Three.
When microscopes are referred to, most people think of optical microscopes. These instruments were developed principally to meet the needs of the biological sciences. They aren't that useful for metallurgists. Metallurgists have large and awkwardly shaped specimens. So those who need to examine metal objects or metal structures use a metallurgical microscope. This is a special, the observing and illuminating systems of a metallurgical microscope are mounted in a way that allows adjustment for accommodating odd-shaped samples. Metallurgical microscopes are equipped with devices that provide the capacity to measure an object in the X, Y, and Z axes. These microscopes are frequently used in the field instead of in the laboratory, so they must be more durable.
How is a metallurgical microscope different from an optical microscope? Four.
Since people communicate mostly through speech, you can imagine that a defect in speaking or hearing abilities can be an enormous handicap, right? Okay, there are 3 conditions in which communication disorders can result. Any ideas what these may be? 3 conditions. Yes?
Well, the obvious condition, I think, would be a physical one. Let's say, like, if someone's eardrum has been damaged because of an illness or an injury, that person might not be able to hear. And being deaf or partially deaf not only affects the person's ability to hear, but also deaf people's speech sometimes isn't all that clear, so that makes it difficult for others to understand them.
You bet. If something goes wrong with the speech or hearing mechanisms, communication disorders can result. Sue?
Well, I have a cousin who suffered brain damage in an accident, and he can't speak very well. And some people are just born with something wrong.
Yes, that's a condition we classify it under the condition of abnormal functioning of the brain. Besides accidents, people may be born with this condition, or it can occur as a result of a stroke or a tumor. And the 3rd condition, anybody?
Well, some people have been badly shocked, traumatized, and they get kind of emotionally upset, you know. I read about a boy who just stopped talking after he saw this really terrible accident.
Good point. Yes, an unusual emotional or psychological problem can cause communication disorders. Okay, so communication disorders can result from 1. Something going wrong with the speech or hearing mechanisms. 2. Abnormal functioning of the brain. And finally, an unusual emotional or psychological problem. Now, fortunately, most communication disorders can be improved to some degree with the help of a speech pathologist.
What is true about communication disorders? The program continues on the next CD.